two, one, two, two.
A couple of weeks ago, I came across this video. When I watched it, I had strong negative feelings about Mr. Rangan's opinion about film representation, trans people representation in particular. But I refrained from sharing any opinions for two reasons. One, I'm a cishet, socially privileged male. Two, I was hoping Twitter people would discuss his opinions critically on Twitter. To my bad, the latter hasn't happened yet. So, at the risk of seeming dubious and tone deaf, I made this video to share my opinions on marginalized people's representation in film and to counter Baradwaj Rangan's view expressed in this video. Hi, I'm Ajay and welcome to my channel. I have divided this video into two parts. In the first part, I discussed why it's important that trans people should play the transgendered roles. In the second part, I concluded my thoughts and expressed some concerns. For those of you who haven't seen the video, let me set the context. Someone asked Baradwaj Rangan, how important do you think representation is in Tamil cinema, especially the representation of the weaker section? The questioner gave Super Deluxe as an example and pointed out criticisms the maker of Super Deluxe got for casting Vijay Sethupathi as a trans woman. To that, Rangan replied,
Tough question. The easy answer will be to say they should get a real transgender.
Then discussed the practical difficulties in casting a trans person for that role. Then implicitly, he targeted the very people who raise these questions by questioning their rationale. Let's see them one by one. According to Rangan, the practical difficulties are a film is made on a budget, so the filmmakers are opting for well-known actors and stars to recover the investment and to make profits. A role like Shilpa demands a trans actor. A non-actor cannot pull off that role. On the face of it, these thoughts might seem harmless, even appreciable, because Rangan is not thinking in an utopian vacuum, he is thinking realistically. But if we understand why representation matters, we can see these thoughts of Rangan is counterproductive to this wish.
I wish there was a wider pool of actors, that we were more accepting of trans actors.
To understand this, let's see what film representation is and why it matters, or at least my perspective of it. Film representation primarily means two things. One, visual representation, and the second is representation in workplace. Let's start with the latter, because it's a lot easier to explain. Casting trans persons in trans roles gives trans people job which they rightfully deserve. Jane Ward, a gender and sexuality studies professor, says,
It would be nice if there were enough LGBT roles that anyone could play them because there wasn't any scarcity of representation. However, that's not the case.
Ryan Casata, a transgender actor, says he rarely gets the chance to audition for cisgender characters.
That has nothing to do with my agents. That's just the way the industry is.
Transgender people don't get the opportunity to audition for cisgender roles. He thinks cisgender people shouldn't take transgender roles away. Now let's move on to a more complicated area, visual representation. Casting trans people in trans roles is not solely about authenticity, as Baradwaj Rangan seems to think, though real-life trans people can bring authenticity to their characters with ease and can have an effect on the creation with real-life experiences. Casting trans people in trans roles is not primarily about bringing authenticity. I think casting trans people in trans roles, or queer people in queer roles for that matter, can have two major effects which are of socio-cultural relevance and importance. One, it empowers the community. Two, it confronts and attacks the bias and ego of the normal people like me. Let's see the first effect. To get an understanding of this effect, we have to understand what it means to see a film, to inhabit its aesthetic and narrative universe from the position of an underrepresented and marginalized audience.
Storytelling, they're the fabric of our lives. They show us what is glorious and tragic and wonderful and funny about the day-to-day experiences that we all share. And when you're gay and don't see that reflected in any way ever in the movies, you began to feel that something truly is wrong.
You feel invisible. You feel like a ghost, and a ghost that nobody believes in. There's this sense of isolation.
Join the club, man. It's a whole group, that is not represented.
We are pathetically starved for images of ourselves, so much so that, a friend will call you up and say, oh, there's this movie you must see. This happened to me. This movie you've got to see. There's this incredible lesbian relationship in it, and there's this great love scene, and all right, they're vampires.
Kate Bornstein, author of the book Gender Law, writes,
all my life, my non-traditional gender identity had been my biggest secret, my deepest shame. It's not that I didn't want to talk about this with someone, it's just that I never saw anything in the culture that encouraged me to talk about my feeling.
Transgender and queer representation in the media can make or break real-life queer and transgender people's sense of belonging. Jane Watt says,
When there are so few representations that LGBT viewers can identify with, and then we find out as viewers that in fact, those actors are cis or straight, it is very disappointing because audiences are desperately looking for role models, and looking for people they can identify with.
Journalist Trevor Anderson, who's both queer and transgendered, says,
Consider Laverne Cox, a black transgender woman, playing black transgender woman Sophia Bursett on Orange is the New Black, versus Jeffrey Tambor, a cisgender man, playing transgender woman Maura Pfefferman on Transparent. When you have a cis actor playing a trans role, that connection, that line from Sophia Bursett to Laverne Cox to the black trans women in your community, it just isn't there. And I think that's present as well when it comes to heterosexual straight actors playing queer roles.
This kind of connection is essential for any marginalized audience. It's no accident that people who have more access and exposure to media are coming out more than the people who are not. Let's see the second effect, which is often overlooked. What regular films do, often unawarely, is to reproduce and reaffirm the patriarchal, heterosexual hegemony. With that hegemony being reaffirmed, we, the cisgendered people, are made to feel normal. There's no more powerful social position than that of being, quote-unquote, just normal. This normality is also maintained by various forms of culturally mediated othering like job discrimination. Let's get a little personal. Haven't you had a moment where you felt uncomfortable when a trans person came sit next to you in a bus or tried to converse with you in a public space? Or haven't you had moments when you browse through your phone and see photos like these and you skip them reflexively without any thought? I had moments like this. Though I'm principally against doing these shameful things, I did them nonetheless. Though I don't want to repeat these behaviors, I might repeat them. If you had moments like these, or empathetic enough to not dismiss me as some hypocrite, then you'll understand that mere conceptual understanding is not enough for a change in social attitude. What is needed, I think, is the education of sensibilities. By education, I mean what Robin Hood meant in this passage.
If one could cleanse the word education of its association with schoolrooms, enforced learning, pedantry and boredom, and associate it with sensations of delight and discovery by no means incompatible with a frequent sense of profound disturbance and challenge, then I would describe my view of the arts as above all educational. The word, even thus purified, is ultimately misleading in that it evokes a predominantly conscious and intellectual mode of apprehension, but it is difficult to find a substitute.
For this kind of education, we have nothing but art. I mean art in the broadest sense possible, the way John Dewey did when he wrote. But let's stay with film, the most popular art form of our day, representing trans individuals and their bodies in films, and our continuous exposure to them confronts our unconsciously held bias that we are normal and they are others. This confrontation will ultimately lead us to question the very distinction that separates us from them. You get the opposite of this effect when you cast cisgendered people in trans roles. Susan Stryker, who holds the Barbara Lee Distinguished Chair in Women's Leadership at Mills College in Auckland, says,
Casting particularly well-known cis actors in trans roles helps perpetuate the idea that transness is a kind of deception and that really underneath it all, we're really just cis people in drag.
She considers cisgender people playing transgender roles akin to racial impersonation. Cisgendered person's body acts as a frame, a window, or a lens which enables us to see through their body, supposedly trans body, rather than be as something we look at and get confronted by. Because that's what serious art does. It grabs our attention and places on a subject and forces us to experience the subject in a way the audience hasn't experienced before. Back to Baradwaj Rangan's video. More than his advocacy for cisgendered actors to play transgendered roles, what bothered me more was his contemptuous view of the people who ask for fair representation. If my calling his viewers contemptuous seems unnecessarily harsh, let me explain. In the video, after discussing the practical difficulties, he rhetorically asks, I don't know why this is being restricted only to gender representation alone. Why not other areas as well? Then he drops an enlightened bomb on us. As if the people who ask for fair representations aren't aware of this embarrassingly obvious thing. We should be glad Baradwaj Rangan stopped at acting itself and wasn't trying to enlighten us further by saying story writing is also pretentious, because the writer has to write about someone who does not share his or her identity and background. Rangan is not alone in the advocacy of the right for any actor to play any role.
I should be allowed to play any person, or any tree, or any animal because that is my job and the requirements of my job,
said Scarlett Johansson when she got confronted with criticisms after she expressed her interest to play a transgendered man. Kate Blanchett, who played a lesbian lead in 2015's Carol, defended the practice of straight people playing queer by saying,
I will fight to the death for the right to suspend disbelief and play roles beyond my experience.
People who advocate for artistic liberty at the cost of political correctness and fair representation are generally the people who either benefit from unfair representation like Johansson and Blanchett, or won't get affected by it like Baradwaj Rangan. In this regard, I also share the same privilege as Rangan, and probably the most of you who watched this video. We should never confuse privilege with right. Cisgendered people get to play trans role on screen, not just because they have the right to do so, but because they have the privilege to do so. Rangan seems oblivious of the fact that responsibility of casting trans non-actor or actors in trans role should only reside with the filmmakers. We don't get to point fingers at the trans community for not providing actors. As I said in the beginning of the video, I don't know if it's my place to say all these things. I know I'm being tone deaf. The only reason I made this video is because there wasn't any critical notice to Baradwaj Rangan's view about representation. If any transgender person feels it's not my place to say these things and is willing to express his or her view in a public space, I'll be glad to delete this video. And if any of you who watched this video have anything to add or have any criticisms to make, please feel free to express your opinions in the comments section.